morning, everyone. I can see everyone trickling in. Um, so thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Kate, and I'm the Education Program Lead here at Sierra Club BC. We're going to take about 5 minutes just to let people trickle in. I'm currently tuning in from the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. If you want to drop in the chat where you are tuning in from, that would be awesome. Wow, it's so exciting. We have people from all over BC tuning in. It's so cool to see where all of you are from. As we put in the chat, also, if you're from a school, drop your school name in the chat.
Ooh, we got somebody from the Netherlands too. Nice.
Germany as well.
I love that we're able to reach people from such a wide, you know, region all over the globe. And this is, I think, one of the really nice things about these Zoom platforms and similar things is that they give us this kind of a reach. And wow, it's just so much fun. Oh, I saw somebody was there at the walk and draw as well. That was fun. That was so much fun. We had the intertidal organisms in at Third Beach in Stanley Park in Vancouver. That was so much fun. I didn't get any drawing done at all, but I totally geeked out on all of the life on the coast there. I think it was so much fun.
So I'm personally so excited for this Learn to Draw of the snow goose. I think it's going to be really amazing. I will be monitoring the chat to answer any questions, and I might ask some of them out loud. But without further ado, I will hand it over to our drawing scientist, Dr. Julius Csotonyi.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Kate. Wonderful introduction. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us from wherever you are, from all over BC and the world. This is so much fun to do these. I am actually joining us from, well, not from BC right now. I'm currently in Alberta, in Edmonton. And I actually live just right about on the just about on the borders of the Enoch Cree Nation's lands, the Muskego-Sick. And incidentally, they have done a wonderful job of preserving some of the native forests in this area, and one of the largest patches of forest intact in this entire area near Edmonton. So this is why I think it's very important for us to uh, learn from and respect and give back as much control of the land to First Nations as we can to fight for that, because they have shown over thousands of years how well they're able to take care of this land, so much more so than what's happened ever since people like me from Europe have colonized this place. So this is what we're all about here, is we're trying to spread the word about conservation, how to protect the beautiful living systems of this planet that we live on. and that is hosting us, and we're just one of many species. So with that, let's talk about a very particular being. And so we're going to be talking about snow geese today. So everybody in Canada is probably familiar with geese in a general sense, because Canada geese are one of our iconic animals here, and they have various reputations. I know that they have a very, very special reputation of being aggressive. I personally have not really seen that. I get along so well with birds. I've just had really wonderful experiences with Canada geese. But anyway, I'm sure everybody's got their own stories. But snow geese are not one that I've encountered myself, and I would love to. And snow geese are really, really neat birds because they have a very special, unusual quality. Now, as you might know, a lot of birds in North America are migratory, right? And that they nest in northern areas when it's summer, when it's warmer. And then when it gets colder in the winter, they fly south to wintering grounds. What's really neat about the snow goose is that it's very different from most other Canadian birds. You know, in Canada here, we typically wait for the birds to arrive in the spring after they've gone south for the winter. The snow goose is different. It nests in the far, 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 far north, on the northern edge of North America. And we actually, in BC, we don't see it in the summertime. There's actually one tiny bit in the southwest corner of BC, in the sort of the Vancouver area, the lower mainland, where it actually winters. So the snow geese arrive in the winter in that part. It's the one part of Canada where they do. So this is the coolest thing about snow geese, is that they actually are our winter residents in that little tiny corner of Canada. Otherwise, they go farther south. There's a couple of different populations of them. There's some in the west, some in the east. They go south all the way into southern North America. And we, however, have this one tiny population that you can see in the winter in the southwest corner of BC. So now with that, let's start drawing the snow geese. I am going to share my screen here. And let's see here, get the application going here. Here we go. So now you should hopefully, in the next couple of seconds here, be able to see my drawing preview of the snow goose that we're going to do here. And Kate, is that looking visible to you? Okay,
Yep,
awesome.
absolutely.
Right on, super. So this is kind of what we're going to be doing today. This is a preview of the drawing we're going to be doing. I have set it up. I'm doing it digitally. I've got a digital tablet and stylus, and I am setting it up in a way that it is the format is the same as like a letter 8.5 by 11-inch page. So if you want to use just a regular page, you can do it. We'll want to pay attention to where on the page we're kind of setting things up so that it fits. And I'll kind of let you know as we go along. One thing to keep in mind is that I'm going to be telling you sometimes that I'm going to be switching over to just light lines versus heavy lines. Heavy lines are going to be like what we want to do for, like, you know, full weight of the pencil. Light lines are where we're just kind of outlining lightly something, maybe a shape to kind of guide us along. And you don't want to make those heavy because we don't want them to show up too much later on. I'll put those light lines in red. So you'll know which ones you don't want to make heavily. And hopefully that makes it clear. Okay, so what we're going to do is start up now, drawing the snow goose. I might actually be looking over in this direction some of the time. So if I'm doing that, it's because I'm looking at my tablet, which is off to the side of the camera. And then I'll try to kind of keep looking back toward the camera as well. So I'm going to switch off the preview, and we're going to start up drawing the goose. Let me just see here. Here we go. We have. All right. So the first thing that we're going to do here is so as you saw in the preview, this goose is going to be sort of in a very unusual kind of a posture, right? We often see them standing or flying in the air. This one's landing. And there's a reason why I'm doing it this way, and I'll show you later. It has to do with their flight feathers. Kind of cool that way. I'll tell you about that in a second. But for now, we're going to start by putting the goose's body in place in the middle of the page. So we're going to switch to light lines now, okay? So for me, I'm going to do this in red because I want to make it, not too visible later. So I'm going to draw, we want to draw a rectangle sort of slanted on its side, kind of two squares side by side, right in the middle of your page. And it'll look something like this. It's like two squares next to each other. Like this. And so if you draw a dotted line along the middle, you can see that each of those is about a square, and then it's a rectangle on its side. This is kind of just to kind of give us a general placement for the body of the animal. Okay, so that's our body rectangle. Now what we're going to do is we're going to switch to heavy lines, and I'm going to make a new layer actually for myself. And we're going to actually draw in some of the details of the body. This is kind of, we're just setting in the anchor, the sort of the center of the bird. And that way we can work around it. So I'm going to switch to black, so heavier lines here. And what you're going to do is, because the bird isn't actually rectangular fully, right? It's got sort of curves on it. And so the kind of curves we have are on the belly and the torso. If you go to the bottom of that rectangle, we're going to draw this slightly curved line like this, but it's easier to draw it, I find, when the rectangle is there, because you can see that it's sort of near the lines that we've set up. That's the sort of the belly of the bird. Then there's going to be sort of like the back, the lower back of the bird, and we're going to go up to the top of that second rectangle on the lower left, and we're going to do a little curved line like that. And there's one more curved line we're going to do. That's where the right wing joins the bird's chest. And that is going to be this kind of not a very heavy line, kind of a heavy-ish line, but you can make a little dotted line or whatever. It's kind of like, it's more a crease than anything else. So it's just kind of a lightish line. That's kind of where the wing is, because it's rounded, because the wing is actually, it's really muscular. There's a lot of muscles there, right? Because the bird, this is a big bird. And to flap and keep itself aloft, it needs to have very powerful muscles attaching its wings to its body. So we see kind of a bulging wing. Okay? So that's the main outline of the body. Now what we're going to do is set up the head and neck. Now geese, Canada geese, Ross geese, snow geese, all kinds of geese have these long necks. And they're kind of like ducks, but even longer. And so the bottom of the neck, so it is kind of curved here. This animal is coming in for a landing, so the head is kind of pointing straight forward, but the body is tilted back. It's kind of like, yeah, it's kind of tilting itself back because it's slowing itself down for the landing. And so the neck is kind of tilted forward. So the bottom of the neck comes like this from the bottom of the body, the front of the body that we just finished drawing. And then you go to the top corner of that rectangle, and we're going to draw the top edge of the neck, which is also kind of curved like this. And then it grades right into the top of the head, which is this part here. Okay. So now we've got the neck and the head in place. And I love to draw them in these different postures, these unusual postures, instead of like just a side view of it standing. It's easier to draw those, but these are much more dynamic, and I find it just more interesting and fun to draw dynamic images of animals. So this is why I've chosen this. Now, of course, it needs a beak, right? Birds need beaks to eat. And so we're going to put the beak in place. They have a heavy beak. There's a really, really cool things about the beak that I'm going to tell you about in a second here. So the beak is kind of a cone-shaped or triangular shape that comes off the front of the head. It's kind of curved like this, concave or sort of dented in at the top. And at the bottom, it's almost straight. It's slightly curved like that. And there's also a nostril, kind of like we have our nostrils. Our noses are soft, and our nostrils are kind of surrounded by soft tissue. Birds are different. Birds have their nostrils embedded in their beak, and their beak is hard. It's kind of like the same kind of stuff that your fingernails are made of. It's keratin, right? And within it, some bone. Okay, so the bird's nostrils are right inside that hard thing. So it's a very different setup. The nostril is here about slightly over midway down the beak, like that. And then the back end of the beak has a sharp line to it. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here just to show you more easily as I draw this. The back end of the beak, on the very top, you kind of have this, it projects backward, and then it goes forward, backward again, and then there's a little notch at the bottom, like that. So that's the shape of the beak, nice goose beak. And so interesting thing, actually, why do birds have beaks? Oh, by the way, geese are dinosaurs. This is really cool, I think. All birds are dinosaurs. They're actually dinosaurs. They descended directly from dinosaurs. They're the only living dinosaurs we know of. They descended from the theropod dinosaurs, kind of like the raptors that on Jurassic Park, those kinds, or the T-Rex relatives, those groups of two-legged animals. But birds look different from the dinosaurs we see in the fossil record. Dinosaurs didn't have these hard beaks most of the time. Why do birds? Well, there's an idea, and it makes a lot of sense. It's still being tested, but it might be possible that the reason why birds are the only ones of the dinosaurs that survived the big extinction event 66 million years ago is that when the asteroid struck and just totally caused a massive cloud of dust around the Earth that stopped plants from being able to make food with photosynthesis, there were still seeds around, right? And so animals that could feed on the seeds that were already there would have this longer lasting food. The leaves may have fallen off trees and bushes, and so animals that were eating leaves might not have survived, but the ones that ate seeds with hard beaks may have survived better. So that's one idea. That might be why birds have beaks now. They're only dinosaurs. Neat kind of thing. Anyway, so that's the beak of our goose. There's a mouth on that beak, right? Because it's got to eat. So the mouth is actually it has kind of a funny, almost like a little bit of a frown. So if you go to the front end of the beak, you draw this sort of curved line. It kind of curves slightly downward toward the back of the beak like that. Kind of has a little bit of looks like a bit of a frown. But now we're going to switch this frown into a little bit of a grin. This is kind of where the cool part comes in. Geese and ducks. Okay, so birds in general, they don't have teeth, right? This is one of the big differences between birds and our sort of traditional dinosaurs from, back in the Jurassic and Cretaceous and Triassic. They had teeth, most of them. Birds don't. But some birds have their beaks in such a way so that the edges of their beaks have these little serrations or these little sharp bumps that function kind of like teeth. They are able to grab things and hold things with them, like insects. Hummingbirds have tiny little tooth-like things, for example, when they eat insects. They don't just drink pollen. And geese and ducks and swans and yeah, I already said geese, didn't I? We're talking about geese. They have these little serrations, these little bumps. And so actually, if you were to draw the mouth properly, this is something we can sort of fix up a little bit. You would draw it as a tiny little bit of a wiggly line. So it looks like it's got little bumps like that. Okay, because it's got both the upper and lower jaws have these little, almost like tooth-like bits. And here's where we're going to make it into sort of a little bit of a grin. It's actually a large area on the beak that has these sort of sharp edged things. And what ends up happening is that we're going to draw this sort of like almost like a loop around the mouth, like this. This area on the goose is actually kind of black colored. And if you look at it closely, it's got a whole lot of these little vertical lines, up and down lines on it. Those are the edges of what become the those little sharp pointed tooth-like things. And so you can actually see it on the side of the goose when you look at its mouth. It's got this, it almost looks like, how whales have that filtering, those filtering things in their mouth called baleen plates. It looks almost like baleen. And so they use this to cut vegetation, because snow geese eat various parts of grasses, their leaves, their roots, their seeds. And so they will sometimes even dig up plants and eat their roots, but they need to be able to slice the vegetation because the vegetation is hard. It has, even leaves are pretty tough, and especially grasses and sedges. They have a lot of the cell walls are really tough. And so you need something to slice through it. And so their beaks are designed in a way or evolved in a way that actually can slice through it pretty effectively. This dark area on the beak is called the tomia. These serrations and so on, it's called the tomia. And it's spelled like this. It's kind of a neat thing that you can kind of wow your peers with, is that you know the name of these tooth-like parts of birds' beaks. Okay, so there we go, the tomia. Now, of course, the bird needs to be able to see, right? To be able to find its prey, which is vegetation mostly. And so we're going to put the eye in place. And the eye is kind of a like a lemon-shaped shape here. This, like that. And it's like I got my, let me just reset the size of my pen because it reset itself. Sometimes it does that. It's a little bit thinner now. Okay, so here we go. Now we're back. The eye is actually a very dark eye. And I'm just going to fix this one up. So you can actually pretty much color it in black, but remember that eyes, you can kind of make them look like they're shiny, because they are, by leaving a little bit of a white spot, sort of representing a reflection of the sun. And so we're gonna say that the bird is sort of flying in the direction of the sun, so that little white spot is up in the upper right corner of the eye. So I'll leave a little light spot there and fill in the rest of it kind of black. And that's the eye of our snow goose. And there we go. So we've got a beak, we've got nostrils, we've got eyes. We're starting to build up the senses and ability to eat. Actually, speaking of eating, this is interesting. The population of snow geese, most of the time when we do these webinars, we're often focusing on animals that have very, very low populations, very few endangered animals that we need to protect very carefully. And we do need to protect all life. But some forms of life are decreasing in number a lot, unfortunately, but some are increasing. Snow geese are increasing in their population right now. It's unusual. And it also has to do with what we as humans are doing. Snow geese eat grasses in various ways. And it just so happens that we humans love grasses. And if you doubt that, just look in your kitchen, and if you find some bread, you'll know we do, because we grow wheat and other kinds of grasses. Wheat is a grass to make bread, for flour, and it is one of our major crops. And so when we have huge agricultural fields and fields of wheat, after it's harvested, there's usually some leftover seeds. And so snow geese will move into these fields and feed on the leftover seeds of these grains of the grasses that we grow. And because we have turned so much forest and prairie into these sort of monoculture, single crops of these grasses, snow geese love this. And so it actually benefits them. And so their population is just skyrocketing. They're growing at about 5% per year. And right now, there are worldwide about 16 million of them, which is actually not bad for an animal species, because most types have very much fewer numbers. Of just the one sort of population or subspecies that we have on the west here, the ones that you're likely to encounter in southwestern BC, the lesser snow goose, there are about 5 million that are adults and sort of that are able to breed. So a lot of them, and growing in number. So when we're talking about feeding and what they feed on, this has a lot to do with how their populations are fluctuating, and they're increasing in number because of our activities again. So our footprint on the biosphere is huge. Sometimes and most of the time, unfortunately, it harms life, wildlife. But in this case, it's an unusual situation where it's actually helping. But when we think of it as helping, we have to think of the bigger picture. Always think of the bigger picture. Snow geese, when they increase in population, we have to think about what's happening to their natural communities, their ecosystems in the far north where they are laying their eggs. That is tundra. It's a very sensitive, treeless, sort of a flat landscape, very sensitive to disturbance. And so when you have a huge and increasing number of geese using it, it starts to actually harm the native plants and other species. And so our activities increasing the number of these geese is indirectly harming the northern ecosystems where the geese land to nest. So it's all connected. This is what we always have to remember. All of these life forms are connected with each other in many different ways. And so if we help one of them, we might actually be destabilizing a very critical balance. So keep that in mind. Okay, so that's the head of the goose, the business end when it comes to feeding. And now we're going to add a tail to the goose. Okay, so the next thing here is that geese, so when a goose is landing, you'll see this really neat thing. They kind of spread their tail feathers out. This is when we see the tails most amazingly. They're using their tail in a way that is, so if you look at an aircraft, right, an airplane, they have the vertical tail, right? And birds don't have that, right? Birds don't have a way to, this vertical stabilizer. In an airplane, it keeps the plane from rocking side to side too much, right? Because it kind of cuts through the air in a way opposite to the wings. Well, birds actually use their tail to do that. Birds are able to turn their tail side to side and help stabilize themselves in a very much more dynamic way than airplanes are, because airplanes can't move their wings. And so birds' tails function in a similar way as the airplane's vertical and horizontal tail fins, but they're much more dynamic. So what we're going to do is draw the tail. It's a bunch of feathers. It's basically a big fan. So the outline of it, I'm going to draw the outline, but also kind of make a bumpy outline because it represents all the separate feathers. Kind of like this, coming down from that rectangle. And we're actually going to leave a little gap here and another little gap because we're going to put the legs in place afterwards. And we're going to connect it to the bottom of the body like that. You can also, wherever you've added these dents, there's a little bit of a line because it's the feathers, the edges of the feathers. A tail of a bird is made up of a whole bunch of feathers placed side by side and overlapping, actually. So it makes, these are all separate feathers, but as they overlap, they create a single surface. And this single surface then sort of resists motion, air motion, and so basically acts as a stabilizing fin, basically, for the bird, as it swims through the air, so to speak. Okay? So now we've got important parts of the bird, but we are missing a couple of very important parts. One of the key features of birds, right, is their ability to fly, and without wings, they can't fly. So we kind of need to put wings on this bird. So what I'm going to do is zoom out, and in this case, I'm going to switch now to my red color. So we're going to do light lines here because we're just going to be adding something that we don't want to, have remain as very dark. We're going to fill in more details afterwards, okay? So we're going to outline the wings, basically. And so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to start with the left wing of the bird. This left wing is fully spread out and is fully visible to us, kind of like if I have my hand and hold it flat up toward the camera, you're seeing the full hand. Well, that's how this one is basically. And so I'm going to take my red pen, and again, this is a light line. We're going to put the front edge of the wing. We're going to start at the shoulder of the bird and go out in pretty much a straight line past its beak, just below its beak, quite a ways out, and then we'll turn up the tip like this. So that's the front, the leading edge of the wing. And then we're going to make another line that is going to be the trailing edge of the wing, the back end of it. And so we're going to start again from the base of the body, very near the tail this time, down here. And again, in red is a light line. Going to come downward a little bit and then bend. This is the base of the feathers at the base of the wing. And now we're going to go out almost straight, sideways, ever so slightly getting closer toward that top line we made. And there's going to be a little notch here. And then a big curved line as we get closer and closer and closer to the tip. And when we finally reach the tip like this. So it's kind of you can see the shape of the wing there. This is the way that the feathers make this big big plane surface, basically. And again, it's a whole bunch of feathers that are overlapping with each other in such a way that they create a single surface. And this is how birds are able to fly, of course, because that single surface resists air moving in one direction. Okay, and then now we're going to produce this similar kind of an outline for the other wing, the bird's right wing. Now, this bird is landing, and because of that, its wings are not fully outstretched. They're kind of pushed forward, right? Downward, I guess, in its body. And so this wing, we're not seeing flat on. We're seeing sort of edge on partly. But also, it's flexible. The feathers are flexible and the arms are flexible. And so it's not a single straight line. This wing is kind of curved as it interacts with the air. So what we're going to do here is make a very curved line. We're going to start at the very near the tail again on the right side of the bird, which is sort of our left side. And we're going to make a very curved line like this that goes almost parallel to the body, but gets closer and closer to the shoulder, goes past the shoulder, past the neck, moving away from the neck, and then it starts to curve back this way, comes up to a tip here, and then it sharply loops back and connects up with that line that we just made, just behind where the head would be. So it's kind of a weird loop. This is the way in which the wing feathers are curving as they're slicing through the air. The other part of the wing, so this wing, we're seeing it almost edge on, but not quite edge on. So we need to add the edge of the wing, the leading edge of the wing that we can see just barely above that edge. So we're going to start actually from very near the base of that line we just made. And I'm just going to draw an arrow here. You don't have to draw this arrow, but I'm going to show you where it starts. It starts right here. That's where we're going to start. And we're going to end up right here. But we're going to do it this way. So we're going to go at a very sharp little angle like that. It's just a barely curved line that moves away from that line we made and then moves back toward it and connects up here. That's now now we can see the top of the wing there, the top of the bird's right wing. And then one more line with these light lines again is going to allow us to see the sort of where the base of the wing feathers separate from the body. And so you go down to here, don't draw this line, but this is an arrow, down to the base here and make a line that connects right to the body to the point that is halfway along that rectangle that we made initially for the body. And then the last little line connects the shoulder of the bird to the wing. Just a teeny little line right up here. It's right there. Okay. That's a weird shaped wing, but what it shows is how flexible they are, and they need to be flexible. This is where they're different from airplanes. For airplanes, their wings only provide lift. In other words, the shape of the wing, if you slice through it, would be curved in a way so that it forces air to go along a longer path on the top than underneath the wing, which causes the pressure to be lower above it, which basically sucks the wing upward. In birds, that's also the case. They have this special shaped wing, which causes their wings to be sort of sucked upward as they move forward through the air. This is called lift. But they also, because they can flap their wings, they also provide thrust. In an airplane, thrust is provided by the engine, by the propeller or by the jet engine. And the wings are rigid. In birds, the wings provide the thrust as well, pushing against the air and basically powering the bird as well as providing lift. Really, really neat this way. They have dual functions. Okay, so they have to be flexible.
Julius, we have a question. So someone wants to know, are you working from a photo reference or from an anatomical know-how?
It's a bit of both. I've looked at several different photos of the birds. And so basically, I have an idea of certain ways that their wings move, but also from understanding the way in which their wings change direction from having looked at videos of birds, having seen them in life. a combination of things. So artists basically typically work in this way where they have some know-how. I'm a biologist, so I have that background, which helps me. And also I need to look at many, many photographs because sometimes just knowing how something works, it misses certain nuances about the way in which parts of the animal flex in different ways than other parts. And photographs help us to kind of fill in those gaps. So it's a good question, actually. So there we go. So now we have an outline of the wings. What we're going to do now is add the details of the feathers. And this is where it kind of gets kind of cool. The first thing to keep in mind is that bird wings are their arms, right? They're the equivalent of our arms. We don't have feathers on our arms, but if we did, we would have a good model of a bird's wing. Birds have feathers all over their arms, and that's why they can fly. And so we're going to draw sort of an outline. Now we're going to go with, again, the heavier line. So I'm switching back to black here. This is an indication that we're putting in the final details on these. So the bird's left arm, we're going to draw sort of an outline. Okay, so this is kind of like we're looking along that line, the red line that I drew, and starting from the shoulder of the bird's left shoulder, I'm going to make this ever so slightly curved line that is almost the same as the line that we made, but you can see it curves a little bit differently, like that. And then there's a series of feathers called coverts that outline kind of most of the thickness of the arm of the bird. Now the bird's arm is a little thinner than what we're going to draw, but we're drawing the edge of those covert feathers. They're feathers that cover over the arm of the bird, basically the thickest part of the wing. And so you can almost do a dotted line here because it's or just kind of a very not a too heavy line. Looks a bit like this. So this is kind of the thickest part of the wing. And that's where where the muscles are. So you look at the bird's wing and its body, and you compare it to us, right? We have relatively narrow arms, and our body is such that we are flat in an up and down way and wider, basically. Birds are kind of the opposite. They're deeper in their body, in their torso, and a little bit narrower. And so if you go and put your fingers in the middle of your chest, you'll find this bit of a bony bump. This is called a sternum. It's a bone that it not only provides an anchor for your ribs, but also is part of what your pectoral muscles connect to, the ones that move your arm inward like this. For birds, that sternum bone is much deeper. It actually projects outward in a kind of a keel, like a long plate. And it's that way because it provides a big surface area for much bigger pectoral muscles. The pectorals that allow the wings to pull forward and inward, like this bird is doing when it's landing. That's where they require the greatest amount of force to basically push themselves upward into the air. And so they need really powerful pectoral muscles. And that's why they've got this deeper chest than we typically do. They're deep and narrow as opposed to wide and flat. Okay, so you see that kind of explains the shape here. So we now have the big feathers. These first ones that we're going to put onto the bird's left wing are called the primaries. And we're again doing heavier lines now. I'm going to follow the front edge of that line we made in red or light. And there's going to be about 10 of these primaries. They start out like narrow tipped like this. There's 2, and then they get a little bit thicker. 3. And actually, if I were to draw them fully, I would actually have to make a line all the way out to here. Each of these, they kind of widen out. You'll notice that they're asymmetrical. In other words, they don't look the same one side on the other. They're kind of they're shaped differently on the leading edge versus the trailing edge. This is important for flight, actually. Birds wouldn't be able to fly so well if their feathers were symmetrical. And it is only the flight feathers that are like this. The rest of the feathers on the body, if you look at a feather and you have the central vein, and then the little uh goodness, I forget now the name of the little fibers that come off the sides. Anyway, these are pennaceous feathers. If you look at them from the body feather, they look the same on both sides, but wing feathers are different. They look different on one side versus the other side of the vein. And it's important for flight. There's another one. I'm just going to put about 10 of these. Typically, birds have about 11 of these, and then one of them is typically not really visible. Different birds have different numbers. A few of them, like flamingos and some others, have fewer, maybe only about 7 or so. And then you have a set of these sort of smaller primaries, this to connect up underneath, or a little bit more towards the arm. You'll notice too that the way that these are stacked is that the back edge of the feathers are visible on the bottom of the wing. On the top of the wing is the front edge of the feathers that are visible. And it has to do with the way that they sit on the air, basically. And when air pushes on the wing from below, this is what keeps them from separating. Like, it's like blinds. If you blow at blinds in a certain way, they'll stay together in one plane. But if you blow at them in an opposite direction, they kind of separate out. We don't want them to separate because that will allow air to move through it and the wing will be useless. So this particular configuration keeps the air pushing them together into a single plane. It's really neat how that works. So this is the primary feathers. And if you have time, you can also draw the veins in, like the central shaft, basically. But we're not going to worry about that right now. You can do that later. There's a set of feathers called the secondary feathers. And those are the ones that, so what we just drew now, those primaries, those are actually connected to, remember birds are dinosaurs, they had a wrist and a hand. These feathers that we just drew are connected to the hand of the bird, to the fingers. Okay? And now what we're going to draw are the secondaries, which are connected to the bird's forearm. And that's basically a series of feathers that come down like this and connect up with the forearm of the bird. And you'd really hardly even see the upper arm of the bird. It's kind of their elbow is very close to their bodies, so you're only seeing mostly these. There's actually a set of what are called tertiary feathers near the base here that are connected to the upper arm of the bird, but you can barely even see them in this particular view. Okay? And then of course there's going to be those little sort of secondaries. This. There's a lot of lines in this drawing because we have a lot of feathers. Birds are composed of lots of feathers. We're not going to draw all the feathers on the bird, but some of these on the wings are kind of important. So that's why we drew these. And here's a really cool thing. This is why I wanted to draw this bird landing. There is a very special feather called the alula. It's actually often a series of feathers. It looks like a single feather. It comes up on top at the wrist of the bird, and it's a little thing like this. Okay? It sticks out like that. Actually, I'm just going to erase this bit of line. What's special about the alula? It's so small. Why could it function as anything? Well, normally in flight, it's actually, these are the feathers attached to the bird's thumb, right? So again, dinosaurs, they've got several fingers. These are what's left of the bird's thumb. Normally, they're flat against the wing when it's flying. But when it's landing, they come out. And why is that important? Because if you've ever ridden on an airplane, and when you're landing, you'll notice that these slats come out of the front of the wing. They're extended. What's important about that is that it allows the airplane to, when it's in a steep angle as it's landing, to not stall, to not slow down too much for it to fall out of the air. The special way in which the air passes over these slats allows the airplane to move slower at an angle. It's the same thing that the bird's alula does. Actually, when it's landing, it stretches these out, and it breaks up the air movement in such a way that it allows the bird to remain stable at a slower, steeper angle of landing. So really cool that way, I think. So now we're just gonna draw the rest of the feathers on the other side. I'm gonna do this quite quickly here. The base on the underside of the wing here. So we're just gonna do these feathers. Now they look much closer together, these lines, because we're seeing it almost edge on. These are the secondaries that we drew on the other side. Very close together lines, because yeah, those feathers we're seeing edge on. And then the main part of the upper side of the wing on that side, this is where it gets kind of cool, because so we're gonna first of all follow along the line, the edge of the leading edge of the wing here that we did in, which I did in red. And then the feathers, because we're seeing it at such an unusual way, they're gonna look like they're sort of fanning out. So it'll kind of come like this. You see how they kind of change in the angle as I go along the wing? Because we're seeing them from a different angle at the front versus the back of the wing. And then they get closer and closer together here because we're seeing them more and more on edge. This is kind of, as artists, we try to envision things from different angles, and we have to keep in mind perspective and foreshortening, which is that objects that are long appear shorter when they're seen, face on, right? And again, there the second set of feathers here. And actually here, what we have to keep in mind is the front edge of the feathers that we see. It's harder to draw it like that, but basically just keep in mind that it's the front leading edge of the feathers that is visible on the top of the wing. I've seen a lot of drawings get this wrong before, and so if you can get this right, you're like scoring extra points as an artist of wildlife. Okay, and then of course there's that tip of the wing that's kind of folded back by the way that the air is kind of pushing it. And there's just a few feathers that are visible there. There's primaries. There's that tip one here. There's another one. And now we're again seeing them from the underside. It's just a really complex way in which these feathers interact with the air. They bend, but that's what's beautiful about life. It's flexible in a literal sense and also figuratively. Life adapts, and it adapts to change. In this case, wing feathers adapt to changing air pressure. It's just the neatest thing. So there we got the wings of the bird in place now. One last thing. Remember, we need that alula again on that wing as well, that tiny little feathery thing on the thumb of the bird, and that comes up right here where the wrist will be. Just a little, it's only less visible here because the wing is shown more edge on. The last things we need are the bird's feet, right? Because this bird needs to land. And so we're going to put the legs in place first. They're short legs. Ducks and geese, these groups have relatively short legs. We left that gap in the tail for this reason. Here's the bird's left leg coming out. It's very short. There's the base, kind of, there's a feathery base, and then there's like, it's just skin with scales on it. And then the right leg of the bird is quite nearby as well. And there's that little chunk of feathery base where most of the bird's shin and its thigh is hidden within the feather. You can't really see them. All we're seeing here is basically kind of like not the foot bones of the bird. It's the ankle, basically, and what's below it. Birds walk on their toes, not on their heels. Their heels are way up in the top corner here. And then their feet. And the neat thing about geese is that they have webbed feet, right? Because what they can do, ducks and geese and swans, they are water birds, and that they are able to float on the surface of water. And not only do they use their feet to walk, but they use them as paddles. So they also use them for propulsion in the water to push themselves along in the water. This is why their toes are connected by this flap of skin in between them. And so they have these 3 toes. I'm going to do the right foot first. 3 toes with the little claw at the end of each. And then between them, there's this soft webbing that connects and the toes and makes all of the toes into one big triangular surface. There's also a fourth toe, just a little bit of it's basically not much more than a little claw kind of thing almost at the base. I'll point it to it with an arrow right there. Okay. So that's the right foot of the bird. And then the left foot is the last piece here. Sorry, that was the left foot of the bird. I'm getting my directions confused. This here is the right foot. Again, 3 toes. Now we're seeing it at a little bit of a different angle, a little bit more edge on. So the toes kind of overlap each other. Again, as an artist, we try to think of things as not just seeing them from face on, but realistically. Sometimes they bend their feet in different directions, and so the toes can overlap. And there's the webbing between. So now we have these webbed feet that are really effective, and then the fourth toe is barely visible from this angle. Just a little bit of a notch at the base of the foot. So this bird is landing, and it's pushing on the air really hard. They land in tundra in the north where they nest and they produce about 3 to 5 eggs. The babies actually, when they hatch after about roughly 25 days, they can walk after a few hours. That's really neat. They're able to actually feed themselves and walk almost immediately after hatching. It's very different from birds in your backyard that build nests in trees where the babies are what are called altricial. Altricial means that they are helpless initially. They have no feathers, their eyes aren't open, they've got these big beaks that they open for the parents to feed them. They're helpless. They're weak. These birds, ducks and geese and so on that nest on the ground like this, they're precocial, the babies. Precocial means that they are able to fend for themselves, they're able to walk, they're not helpless by any means. This is important for ground nesting birds because there's a lot of predators that walk on the ground as well, like Arctic foxes, for example. The really neat thing is that to fend against predators like well, there's also other birds like skuas that are these, they look a little bit like gulls, and they will attack the eggs and the babies. But the geese also have a way of protecting a little bit against skuas. They nest often near the territories of snowy owls. And snowy owls, if you've ever seen them, they're beautiful, white birds with little black flecks on them. They're predators, and they are avoided by a lot of other birds, like skuas, for example. And so if geese nest near them, because snowy owls don't eat the geese, then they're actually sort of like under the umbrella protection of this other predator that is a predator of the geese. So it's kind of a really neat kind of interaction where the geese use this protection of a sort of a bigger predator to protect themselves against sort of the minor predators that actually threaten them. So lots of really neat interactions in the ecosystems in which they live. And these are really, really successful birds. But we have to watch out again with our activities because by their numbers increasing, there's a chance for them to more degrade the tundra habitats, those fragile tundra habitats in the far north, along the northern coasts, where they nest, actually. So one of the things I like to suggest is that we can use these kinds of drawings that you do and maybe write letters to our government representatives, our MLAs, our MPs, and others who are in charge of making up laws, legislation, to ask them to make responsible legislation that protects not just one species of animal, but a whole ecosystems. Because again, we can protect one species, but sometimes, as we've seen with the snow goose, one species, when it's increases beyond its sort of natural numbers because of our activities, can also damage other species. And so we want to protect entire ecosystems, and that's very important to do. So we can use these drawings. I suggested people maybe include them in their letters, either emails or actual physical letters, snail mail, to these people who are making laws, and ask them to do their very best to make responsible legislation that protects these amazing and irreplaceable ecosystems and the life forms that live in them. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to you, Kate. I'm going to turn off the red lines here so you can see our finished bird. That's our, oh, and sorry, one last thing. The snow geese, again, snow is white in color. We're talking about, if we're looking at the color patterns of the animal, yes, they're mostly white, the white form, except the primary feathers, these really important flight feathers are often black. They are black. And so those parts you can actually color black. I've kind of made it a sort of a grayish here, but there's also a blue phase of the goose. Blue sort of in quotation marks, because it's mostly gray. There's a lot of gray on its body, except for those black tips, but its head is still white. And you might see gray forms of the white one when they're young. Young geese are also gray, but the young geese of the white form are gray all over, including their head. So you know the difference. If you see a grayer colored snow goose that has a white head, then you know you're looking at the blue morph. But if it has a dark head, then you know it's just a young of the white form. Really confusing, but really neat diversity. Anyway, and I'll put on the final preview version so that you can see what the full colors look like with the reddish beak and feet. There we have it.
Thanks so much, Julius, for all of us leading this drawing. If you guys want to send us your drawings, that would be absolutely amazing. If you didn't get to finish your drawings, we'll send out a recording later, but we would love to put them all on our website. We have another Learn to Draw coming up in October, which is on salmon sharks. So if you liked this one, I really recommend you all also watch the salmon shark one with us. And please don't forget to check out our educational packet that we made about migratory birds, which is put in the chat. And once again, just a huge thank you all for coming, and a huge thank you to Julius for leading us in this activity.
Thank you, everybody, for joining. It's always so much fun.